It seemed like a good idea at the time. Ready for the assignment. Ready for the My name's Matt McDowell. I'm a what? Job. Okay. Hi, my name's Matt McDowell, and welcome to 52 at 52, where I tell stories about the 52 jobs I've had in my 52 years here. This is job number 23, development assistant / reader. Now, this was my very first Hollywood job, and I was telling my son about this. He goes, well, how many Hollywood jobs did you have? I didn't really count up. We'll count up as we go along, but this was the first one. And you may ask, how did I get this first Hollywood job? Well, I'm here to tell you. I got this job because I am from Gridley, California. Yep, it was basically that simple. At UCLA, they had this big binder of internships that you could go through. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to get a summer internship. This is a good way to break into the business. This is going to be fantastic. I've got the summer. I'll work 2 or 3 days a week at this internship, and this will be good. And so I went through this internship, and I picked my top 10. It's like, okay, these are the top 10 internships I'd like to go for. And then, and this was quite brilliant on my part, I thought, up to a point, I ranked them, like the best one to the least. The one I wanted to the least that I wanted. And I started to interview backwards. Like I started at number 10, 9, 8, etc. That way I figured by the time I got to the first job, the one I really wanted, I'd be used to interviewing people. I'd be used to being interviewed by people, and this would be fine. Well, after about 3 of those interviews, I'm just like, fine, this one will do. And I ended up going for job like number 8. Who knows what those others, who knows what my top 7 were. So that's why I say it was brilliant up to a point. And I got this job because I worked for Laurie Perlman Productions at Warner Brothers. I was in this big silver building across from the main lot. And the reason I got this job, I think, is because I was from Gridley. And I interviewed with Carl York. I almost said my friend Carl York because we became good friends. But I interviewed with Carl York, and he looks at my resume, and he goes, "You're from Gridley?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "When I was in high school, we took a road trip for like the summer, or like a month or something like that. And he and his friend, they went through Gridley, and they thought that was such a funny-sounding name that from then on, whenever somebody was a doofus or a jerk or an idiot, they would call him a Gridley." And here I show up. I'm from Gridley, and he just starts laughing. But it was exciting. I had arrived, but arrived doing what? What was the job? What is the job here? I worked for a producer, and she would produce films, in theory. She never produced a film while I was there that I got to work on. She did some of the other ones, but not that I was directly involved in. What I was involved in was something called development, which is you take a story. I don't know why. I guess you develop a story. They call it development. You're trying to find a good story. The actual job was like I talked about last week. A lot of talking on the phone, a lot of typing, a lot of thinking. Maybe not so much thinking, but a lot of talking on the phone and typing. Taking messages. You took a lot of messages, and I would read a lot. I would read a lot because I was a reader. And what does that mean to be a reader? Well, someone works for 6 months to who maybe 10 years on their screenplay, and they submit it to a producer like Laurie. And then what happens is it comes to a guy like me who's still in college, a bit bitter, maybe not bitter, but still in college, very idealistic, and I read it. And then I write up what's called coverage. And coverage was a 1-page synopsis, like here's what the story is. And then you also had like a 1-page or half a paragraph, half a page of what you thought about it. Would this make a good movie? How was the writing? What, etc. And then whether or not you should pass or maybe or, yeah, let's get this thing going. So that was my job. I would read scripts and then synopsisize them. Is that a word? Summarize them with a synopsis. I guess that's proper, very proper. Have to be very proper here. There will be a quiz, the whole life quiz, the 52 at 52 quiz. In episode 23, how did he misuse the word symbiosis? And I wasn't even using the word symbiosis. So I would recommend these scripts. And so here's a guy who has been working on this screenplay forever, and he gets it, and it's for a guy like me, it's like, nah, I ain't like it. And guess what? That was usually the case, was you didn't like stuff, because it's amazing how much bad stuff there is out there. All the movies that you see, even the bad ones, that's the cream of the crop. And there are hundreds and thousands of scripts and stories floating around there. And the ones that get made are the ones that, they may not be the cream of the crop. They may not be the very best ones. Yeah, I'm going to have to say that they're not. Because there are some movies you're like, why? Because I've read scripts that I liked, and it's like, this is awesome. And it never gets made. I've written some of those. Now, the top tier of development, the people who are really in the know, there would be a hot screenplay that was coming out and people would talk about it, like the agents would start to hype it up. And it's like, okay, the screenplay's coming out. And it would come out, everybody would get it on a Friday afternoon, and then by Monday, that thing was sold or it wasn't sold. And that's where you had your development directors. They would be the ones who would read that script over the weekend. And they'd have sometimes, the poor guys and gals, they'd have sometimes like 10 scripts to read over the weekend. Like, here, I know you've been working crazy. Here's 10 scripts to read. But that was the nature of the business. I was lower tier. I was an assistant to the director of development, and so I would not get those super hot scripts. I would get the ones that were submitted by a friend of the producer, like, oh, can you read this? Or a guy who'd been in the hospital for 2 months and had nothing to do but write a novel. I would read those kind of things. I read some, and almost nothing stands out. I read a few novels that kind of stood out. Like iRobot, I read iRobot I read iRobot by Isaac Asimov. I was like, what would this make a good movie? Of course, I passed. I didn't think it would make a good movie. It was made into a movie. I never saw it because I was biased. Oh, the one I did remember was this novel that this guy had written, and I'm reading it, and it's this couple on a picnic, and their 1-year-old baby who's in a swing is protected because the couple gets eaten by wild pigs, attacked by wild pigs and eaten. I'm like, wow, this is kind of quite an opening, right? It's kind of very not roundabout. What's that movie? Walkabout. Very Walkabout, the Australian film. And I thought, oh, this is kind of, and then it starts to devolve into like, okay, and then they got to go hunt these wild pigs down because they're causing havoc in the community. And so they decided to, after the Doberman pinchers don't work, so they have to stick with the pit bulls. We got to get the pit bulls in there. And then it becomes a pit bull versus wild pig story. Literally, like the pit bulls have names and the wild pigs have names, and it devolves into this, I don't know what, but what a story. So that was the one. That's the one thing I remember. Like it was not good, but it was memorable. It was memorable. And in this job, a shy side of me came out. The shy side of me comes out when I really want something, or I think that I get kind of anxious. I get kind of shy. Or if people are super funny at this big party, I'm like, oh, everyone's super funny. Yikes! Then I just kind of withdraw. Maybe that's natural. I don't know. But my shy side came out in this job. And my boss, Lori, she goes, "Now you're kind of shy." And it was kind of a shock to me because guess what? No one had ever told me I was shy before or since. She's the only person who's ever thought that I was shy. Because I'm not really shy. But I was shy around her. And all she saw was this guy who was like, "Oh, what can I do for you, Miss Myrtle?" And I was a bit of withdrawing. Also, this was the first job that I got really yelled at, like actually screamed at for messing something up. And because my family, we're not a bunch of big screamers. We don't yell. And I'd never had jobs where people yelled at me because the passions were running high. And I got yelled at this job. And guess what? I did not handle it well. It was fun working at the studios. I worked at 2 different studios for Lori. I worked at Warner Brothers, and I also worked at 20th Century Fox. And that was kind of fun. And this was a job I kind of came in and out of. Sometimes it was the summer. Sometimes I would have they would need me to fill in for a month or 2 while I were working on a different project. I liked working out of the 2. I'd have to say I kind of liked working at 20th Century Fox better because you'd look outside and you would see Julia Roberts, or you'd look outside and you'd see a predator from Aliens versus Predator. Not Alien. You'd see Predator. You'd see a predator walking around with a lunch tray. Just not with a lunch tray, but you'd see him walking around the parking lot. A predator. You're on the phone oh, Predator just walked by. But also Warner Brothers was pretty great too, because they had this awesome thing where they'd screen all their films for free, and you could go see any Warner Brothers movie at this great theater, and you have to pay for it. And that was a big plus for me because I love seeing. There's nothing better than seeing a movie for free. I love seeing movies for free. I feel like I'm getting away with something. One of the things that I would do was make a lot of copies of scripts. You'd make all these copies, and it seemed like I was standing at that stupid copier machine forever. And you just, what do you do when you just watch them and you have to make sure the paper's in? Oh, It just endless copies, seemed like. Another thing that we would do in addition to reading, making copies, was something called rolling the calls. And at the end of the day, it was kind of very important for everybody to call everybody back that had tried to get a hold of each other during the day. So you had this piece of paper, and this is before we had spreadsheets, and this is kind of before computers were like really ubiquitous. And so we had this call sheet that you would kind of cut and paste to see who you owed calls to and who owed calls to you. And it was this thing, not me personally, but Lori. And it was this big thing, and she would come in like 5 o'clock, and she's, okay, let's roll the calls. And you'd like go, and then you'd be phoning up everybody and like, hey, can you hold for Lori? And then they'd shout out, hey, so-and-so's on the phone. And she's like, tell him to hang on a second. And she had this awesome little mute button on her thing. So she'd be like, yeah, give him a call back. And she'd unmute it, mute it back and forth. Very exciting. For about a good half an hour, 45 minutes, everyone got left word, and it was like a big like game of tag so that everyone got touches. And it was called rolling the calls. And it seemed to be very important. I mean, like almost the important most. I mean, we'd stress out about that thing. Make sure we got everybody on the list as you're taking calls through the day. Everybody is on the call sheet, so you can call them back. I'm not sure what it accomplished. I guess it accomplished something. They got people talking together. I don't know if they still do that. I wonder if they still do that. Who knows? Some weird things I did. Calligraphy. I did some calligraphy invitations, so I had to learn calligraphy to do these invitations. Because Lori's like, oh, Matt, you know calligraphy. Why don't you do these invitations? And I was so shy that I was like, look, I don't know calligraphy. Let's get somebody else to do it. I'm like, sure. And out I'm buying a calligraphy book and pens and trying to learn calligraphy. And the invitations were a disaster. They were not. Maybe that was. I think that was the one. I think that was the time I got really yelled at because I think I misspelled somebody's name. Sheesh. With calligraphy. And I also did like her logos. I did this logos. She had a lot of trust in me, a lot of faith in me. That was nice. Some other things, I got to deliver presents to Warren Beatty's house. I got to deliver a birthday present to Michael Keaton in his trailer. Like, here you go, Mr. Keaton. Because she was also Michael Keaton's agent before she was a producer. Never got to go onto a set of the film because this was deep. This is, we're talking about being behind the scenes. The only person who's more behind the scenes is the writer. You got the writer who is the 100% behind the scenes, and then you got the development person, and that was me. But this job was even more ephemeral than I thought. Because you go to Hollywood and you think, okay, yeah, we're just going to be, roll the cameras, you got a script, and let's get going. But this was basically, it was like weeks and weeks of people visiting and telling each other stories. And it's just like, hey, and scheduling meetings so that people can tell each other stories, which is kind of weird in a modern, like, what are you going to do? Hey, just come over and tell me a story. And everyone's trying to find that story that they think people will go pay money to see. What kind of stories can you get made? What kind of stories will people go see, pay for? And what kind of story that not only do you want to spend 2 to 3 years on, but other people want to spend 2 to 3 years on and are willing to not just go see the movie, but actually put up the money, like, okay, here's, $100 million, or here's $5 million, or here's, $30 million to tell this story. And so in that sense, it makes sense that there's a lot of hand-wringing. Is this good? Do we like this story? That was my first job in Hollywood. Reader, assistant director of development. How to sum this up? How to wrap it up? How to wrap up my experience as a reader? I guess I learned that I was kind of shy in certain situations, especially if I'm not in charge. If I'm in charge, I'm not shy at all. But if I'm not in charge, I have a tendency to be a submissive follower. So it's best if I'm always in charge. Take note, it's best if I'm always just in charge. That's good. If not, I just become shy. And trust me, nobody wants shy Matt. Job number 23, development assistant / reader. The jobs just keep coming. They just keep coming, these jobs. We're not even halfway done yet. Whew. We will get there. Trust me, we'll get there.